Hey everybody, welcome to the show. And today I get to hang out with my friend Tim Morris. This is going to be some good enlightening stuff today. Tim is a cybersecurity expert. He's a chief security expert. That's his current vocation. And he's also the retired SVP of cyber threat engineering and research at Wells Fargo. So illustrious career. Welcome, Tim, to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here, Johnny.
Man, so we've had some fun conversations, man. So y'all get to get the benefit of that at this point. So we're gonna start here, Tim. Can you tell us a defining moment in your life?
Wow, there's a lot of them. I'll go back to first of all, I have to credit my wife because when you grow up and my father was a pastor. So it's just, there's these points of becoming a man that you're looking for votes of confidence and to have a woman that can actually see your strength beyond what you're doing. So I had jobs, I had many jobs, odd jobs, and she always would just kind of pressure me into saying, hey, you're smarter than you should be able to do it. Not that any jobs, I'm beneath any job at all. It's just
Yeah.
that her potential, she saw my potential. And I remember I had taken a blue collar job and learned how to make Huggies diaper liner. I was there for 9 years. That's where I actually learned IT. We did surgical wrap. And I remember in that thing, she's the one that pushed me to go take that job.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was doing that job. And then I remembered when I was like, okay, I can do a lot more.
Yeah.
Because now it's like I'm working, I'd moved into computers and working with IT and working with consultants who I'd always put on a pedestal. And I'm just like, wow, these people, they're just normal people.
Yeah.
And the stuff they know, I kind of know. And I remember a defining moment when I actually decided to take a risk, take a contract job, leave a 9-year job to take a contract job at a bank for Y2K. Everybody remembers that problem.
Yeah.
And I remember the guy my manager getting so mad at me and just say, what are you doing this for? So after Y2K, there are not going to be any computer jobs.
Yeah.
I just kind of laughed. And I was like, well, that was kind of a defining moment because now I was taking a risk based
Yeah.
upon what had happened the previous 9 to 12 years in my marriage and that kind of stuff. And then I hit the ground in a job I knew nothing about, in a platform I knew nothing about. For those in IT, I was a Unix guy, and they put me in a Windows job, and
Yeah.
that defining moment kind of led the rest of my career because I had to learn it really, really fast. Fake it till you make it, as they kind of say, and
Yep.
then that led through the career I had.
Man, that's amazing. First of all, I just want to give a shout out to your wife.
Yep, thank you.
It reminds me of that scripture that says that he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord.
Yep.
And that's been my experience, man. I've got a wife like that too, man, who just she believe, when she believes in me, it like gives me wings,
Yeah,
and
and
it
that
sounds
happened.
like
I mean, I was loading boxes, doing a couple different jobs, I was doing vending machines, I was doing screen printing, I was doing any warehouse, managing a warehouse. I mean, I'm just, even by then, my standards are growing up. I'm like, this is cool. I'm making money, and
hmm
and she was actually the breadwinner. She was an RN, had a bachelor's degree.
Oh
So
snap.
when I
Yeah.
say I literally married up, it was literal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I even had people. My wife ran into an old friend at the grocery store last week, and I always wondered how Tim ended up with you. She's just so yeah. I did kind of marry up, but it was really that confidence to just say you're smart. You should be using your talents. Doing other things.
What's your wife's name?
Her name's Joni.
Tony, this is a shout out to you if you watch this.
Yeah,
Man,
let her know.
props. Behind every good man, well, maybe not every, but a lot of good men, there's a good woman
Yeah.
who helped us. So
Yes.
thank you for that. Joni, you said? Joni?
Yes. Joni, Joey, and I.
Yeah. So you were able to get to a place where you were able to take a risk, which that right there makes sense as a defining moment. That's the thing that most people don't do or avoid at the crucial moment. It's like they choose safe. We tend to choose safety over risk. Um, and so it's inspiring to hear about that moment. And I think a lot of people that are listening, that's inspiring. Some of us are in moments where we maybe are thinking, contemplating taking a risk. How did you get there to be able to pull that off? Part of it was your wife and encouragement. How else did you get there?
Part of it is there's a little self-reflection and understanding your strengths and weaknesses, and that takes a while. You really don't know that in your teen years and even in your 20s. And I had been at this company for 9 years, and I had basically had three jobs in those 9 years. And I
Yeah.
realized that I would get bored after 2 or 3 years. I was good. I wanted to go learn stuff, and then when I learned it, then I wanted to move on to something else. So kind of had an innate ability, being a natural the way I was raised and just get my natural bent to empathy and leadership. I knew I had those kind of soft skills. Matter of fact, the
Yeah.
manager that got mad at me, he wanted me to go, relocate and run a plant,
Yeah.
because of leadership ability. But that wasn't, I was actually leading a small team at that point, and I kind of wanted to get out of that. So I'd recognized this pattern that, hey, every 2 to 3 years I would get bored, and I had just finished the second stint of, like, my first one was all brand new. Let's go change all the IT systems. Did that. Now we're at the next 3 year renewal. I got to go change all the IT systems again because that's about how often things change every 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I need to do it somewhere different.
Yeah.
Obviously, I had a growing family, had just built a house. I had my fourth child just being born.
Yeah.
And so I wanted a life where my wife could help raise our kids and not have to work all the time. She had already
Yes.
switched to part time, but it was one of those, that was another huge risk. It's like, okay, if I'm going to be the breadwinner, then I've got to stick with the skills that God gave me. And then, that, like I did receive the opportunity to relocate to a completely different part of the country. At that point, though, we were pregnant with our third child. She was 8 months pregnant. Like, no, I don't want to make that big of a change. So it's understanding those risks, balancing those risks. But when this opportunity came up, I decided this is a bigger risk because it's a contract job. I'm used to the very, you know, 401k benefits, all that kind of stuff. And in the contract world, you get paid per hour, but it's like freelancing. You have to go provide that.
Yeah.
And it was a
Yeah.
6 month contract, leaving a 9 year job. When I got on the job, Johnny, I didn't realize they didn't even have a 6 month contract. I didn't check the paperwork. Matter of fact, the
Oh,
2 weeks
snap.
into the job, they had laid off half the team that I had joined for that project.
Yeah.
And so then it's just like, okay, I still felt like I did the right thing. It was a lot of prayer. Then my
Yeah.
wife got really kind of scared. It's like, you
Yeah.
just got
Yeah.
this job and you're taking this contract and you telling me any week on Friday they could come just lay the team out because we had a large team doing a lot of
Yeah.
IT refresh kind of stuff. And I
Yeah.
just said, no, we'll do it. And then I also was new. So to me, that part was exciting. So I really dug in on how Windows works internally, all that kind of stuff. Started learning tools. I was packaging software, which I wasn't a developer, so learning how to do that. Fast forward, that's how I got into cyber because I could reverse malware because I understood
Yeah.
how good software was supposed to work. So I could do dynamic analysis to reverse it. So that's how, but those few months where I was scared to death that I was scared but calm, if that makes sense. It was a risk,
Yeah.
but it's just like, no, I had decided that I wasn't going to put my loyalty or faith in the company and not even in my career. It was in my identity with my skill set and the way I was bent. So I knew I could go either technical route or leadership route. I could go either way. At this point, I chose to be technical individual contributor because I wanted to sharpen my skills in that way. And just, God gave me the brain, the ability to do that, the mind to do that. So, excuse me, that's where I went. So that's how I ended up in there. I remember late 98 till 2000, Y2K came and went. And by that point, they were offering me a full time job. And then by then, I was actually liking the contract role. It's like
Yeah.
you get a little more money, but you got to pay for all your own stuff. And I remember them coming back and forth. But at that point, I had kind of established myself as being able to fix problems. And another weird thing about that is I always looked at problems to solve to get rid of them, which in a contract world, you're billing per hour. So I would see people not they would just put band-aids on problems, not go fix the problems. I
Yeah.
took the opposite approach of not only
Yeah.
fixing the problem, but
Yeah.
asking the questions, why are we even doing this? Because
Yeah.
the project they had spent millions of dollars to put me on was a complete waste of time. And it took me 2 years to prove to them that the process we were going through to create these pristine, like a computer image, a pristine package, would not work. It only worked for the time you did it, and then a day later it starts degrading. 3 months later, it's very degraded. 6 months later, you're having to redo everything you had already done, and it was just like running through mud. I mean, you just and expecting to be clean. It just wasn't going to happen. And so taking that, and that was another risk, is going to eventually my boss, the other boss, I tried to explain to him, and one of them, my peers came to me and said, "You realize if you get this approved, we all lose our jobs." So
Bro,
my
you playing
boss
with
took
fire.
my boss took my words, put them in a letter to the CTO of the bank at the time. This was
Yeah.
pre Wells Fargo. We get a bunch of merger acquisition stuff. And then I remember I get called in his office, and he goes, "So you're telling me all the millions of dollars we just spent was a total waste of time?" I went, "Not for the experience, but this is not sustainable." And so then I ended up leading another team to create a new process.
Wow.
And it was one of those things. And I always noticed every time somebody didn't want to do a job, I try to figure out why that they did
Yeah.
not want to do it. So
Yeah.
I would take the jobs, like go to Columbia, South Carolina, and figure out why this call center's computers are slow. Everybody else would just say, "Well, that's because their computers are old. We can't fix them." And I would go down there. I would take any job that would just say, "Hey, this can't be done," or go figure it out. So that was early in my career because I was still trying to prove my technical ability almost to myself more than others. Because Johnny, imposter syndrome's huge, and you really
Yeah.
never get over it. I mean, every job. I mean, when I took this job 4 years ago, it was like, oh my goodness, I'm chief what? Just the imposter syndrome is huge.
Yeah.
But then it was just a matter of constantly trying to prove yourself, or prove your skills, or whatever. Um, Again, knowing God's there or whatever, but we still try to work on our own merits and figure out how we're doing it, and that's where I was at in my career, also kind of where I was at in my spiritual walk.
Yeah.
Always been in church, always taught Sunday school, led worship a little bit, but that point that hits is like where you really truly relying or trusting. I can go back at it and look and see I absolutely was trusting more than I thought I was,
Yeah.
but at the same time that Providence was laying the stones, the steps, step by step before I ever knew they were coming.
Man, this is so rich, my brother. It's so rich and it's so instructive, right? Like, I love sometimes, man, interviewing the man with the white or the gray hair.
But you don't get
You
them
know what
by
I mean?
accident. We're just happy they're gray, and because many of them turn loose. So if they turn gray, we're okay with it.
Absolutely. But it's because so many of us are on the journey and trying to learn how to walk well professionally, let's say. And so let me tell you some things I see from the story that you just told. Actually, the one thing I noticed in the way that you describe your journey is this idea that there's a better way, right? Like there's you were not stuck in the structures of the way things had always been done. Has given you a creative mind and a discerning mind to ask the question, is there a better way, right? And then to discern the core issue, right? So, some people are like, well, I want to keep my job, so I want to put band-aids on it, which is basically just treating the symptoms, right? Treating the symptoms, right? You can treat the symptoms forever without treating the core disease, right? But you were seeing, you had a bent to discern the core issues. So some of the words, I call these power words from my superpower quest. So they're power words that I think describe you: curious, innovative, faith. That faith background, and then faith, we're going to tie that into identity. We're going to talk about faith and identity a little bit later, but faith as the bedrock. You're a learner. It sounds like you've been a learner, which goes with curious, like a learner. You love to learn. Excitement, right? You're trying to keep yourself excited. You don't want to get bored. Excitement's
Um,
important to you,
no, those seasons are
right?
hard.
You're at your best when you're doing new things, learning new things. Calm, which I want to tie back to faith. You're in a stressful situation. You just took a big risk, and then you find out it's more of a risk than you thought when you get there. And now your wife is nervous, right? Sorry, Joni. Sorry,
Yeah,
Joni.
yeah,
Right? Joni's nervous.
yeah.
And you stay calm. But how do you stay calm? This was the what you said. You said, um, if I want to be a breadwinner, I have to use the gifts God gave me. Long-term faith in God and identity, in the identity that God gave you. You said something like that, right? Long-term faith in God, but in the identity that God actually gave you. And then you made actual real life decisions based on that identity, man.
Right.
That's all I'm trying to teach people,
Yeah.
bro.
Oh, but that's what it comes down to. And being calm, I would not know. Fast forward, geez, 17, 18 years, um, moving into cybersecurity for a large bank that gets attacked hundreds of thousands of times a day.
Yeah,
Now, granted, I had to have the technical ability to be able, but and I managed teams that are so freaking smart. I
yeah,
mean, talk about imposter syndrome. I mean, here's a
yeah,
point you just yield that goes, I'm never going to know what this person knows, and the
yeah.
combination of all of them on the team. I managed a team. We called it a red team. Those are the offensive hackers, and toward the end of my career at the bank.
Yeah,
Our job is you have red team is offensive, blue team is defensive, and you're constantly the blue teams live fire every day, all day.
yeah,
They're trying to nation state attackers, the big,
yeah,
everything, the Russia, the China, the Iran, then the organized crime. They're always coming at the bank. And then the blue that's what the blue team's doing. The red team, they get to choose and pick operations where they
ah,
try to attack the bank's defenses. Sometimes they get a little head start. Sometimes they have no head start. It's just like, how do you do a threat assessment? How do you do? There's very dedicated penetration tests that get done,
yeah,
but the threat assessments. But
yeah,
we would also do these big war games. But nothing
yeah,
prepares you for a live war when you actually have an attacker on the inside
ah,
and you're managing a team and you're in this situation room or war room where personality tempers are flaring, personality hot, everybody's trying to blame somebody for somebody else. Meanwhile, you're trying, as my boss used to tell me, Tim, your job is to keep me out of the news and keep us out of the news and keep me out of it. Okay, so that's your job. So we're in these fights, and I remember a couple of them. One of them specifically that was definitely newsworthy. I mean, this was going to end up on CNN. It was that bad. And you got people screaming at each other. It starts on a Friday morning and we're going till, Sunday night, working, 45 hours in the 3 days. I mean, it's just
oh,
like you take a 2 hour nap, get up and go, that kind of stuff and that kind of stuff. But it's
man,
there's that calmness, which like I said, I don't, it's hard to explain that peace that passes understanding. It's just like, okay, there's something going on here that is really, really bad.
yeah,
I have the team and we have the skills to go figure it out and the tools, and we were able to stop. This one, Johnny, was like, yeah, there was a lot of stress and pressure on. Matter of fact, they were calling. They thought it was a cyber attack, but you don't tell anyone that. But we had to shut down some major services and then deal with the team that didn't do, they basically didn't patch a vulnerability. And so
wow,
that's always, a big problem, even though they claimed they had, but they missed it. It was just a miss and not incompetence. It was just the process that they had didn't catch it. And so we had to do that. Meanwhile, I'm dealing with these Middle Eastern people demanding a large sums of money. You know, Fortunately to our skills, I knew I had a hunch that they were bluffing. They were sending us stuff that was just screenshots. Like they didn't have our data. I could
yeah,
verify they actually got into the place they weren't supposed to get to. I could
yeah,
verify from our forensic skills that they were trying to get the data out, but they couldn't get it out. You
yeah,
know, so I go all the way back to all these things early in my career of trying to learn and risk or whatever, and just staying calm and just say, hey, even on a bad day, there's gonna be a better day. This kind of stuff. To get in
yeah,
these situations where calmness matters. I mean,
yes,
you don't want someone screaming, hair's on fire, chicken little, everything's falling. You can't have that. Even though we have people on the team that are like that, my job is to say, okay, we need to get this person off and just be very decisive. Okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do this, or whatever. Even though, and I get chewed out later by heads of business. Fortunately, our stuff was done correctly and we got rid of, and it was actually a win.
yeah,
Want a win in that categories, that you're dealing with this kind of stuff and ending up in Yeah, by the skin of your teeth, not being on the news, which is good. All the stuff you hear in the news, I feel for anyone because everybody gets a letter about, their identity being stolen and that kind
Yes.
of stuff. All
Yes.
you get multiple. I mean, there's breaches every week. But being in the middle of that and on the other side of it, and know how many of them actually get prevented,
Yeah.
is a huge deal.
Dude, this is huge, man. Like, what an amazing story. And I can imagine the extraordinary pressure you must have been feeling. But to be able to be calm in the midst of that
Right.
by the grace of God,
Yes.
right? What it equips you then, it equips you with the tools for solutions, right? As opposed, fear doesn't equip you for a solution. Fear equips you to retreat. Fear equips you to become smaller and less creative, right? But hope and calmness and peace equips you to, come up with a solution.
Yeah, you become very reactive when you're fearful, and
Yeah,
you typically will do things you're guessing a lot. So
yeah,
early in my career, that preparedness and being under pressure, for other different things that were minuscule. Now,
yeah,
everybody's problems are relative, right? I call it
yeah,
crisis management. So in the cyber world, we talk about incident response. How do you respond to an incident? But it doesn't have to be in cyber. It can be in IT ops. But in your life, I always tell people, you make the best decisions in your life with the best intel. So you have to understand that your intel is your bank of knowledge that you have, what you can find out about the situation right now, and then you lean on, the gifts and your training. I think it was a Navy SEAL quote that said, you never rise to the occasion, you fall to your highest level of learning, or experience,
wow,
you know. So it's like that's what happens in cyber, even though we tend to call it warfare because there's cyber warfare going on all the time. I mean, all the time, every second.
yeah, yeah,
But anyway, so yeah, having that and understanding that operating out of place of fear. I mean, there's a place of anxiousness, obviously, that can be a motivator to do that kind of stuff. But being able to rely on the experience and the team of people that you've built, the culture you have, and being able to do stuff, and then have their back because they're getting ready to do things that they don't want to do, but they know to save the reputation of the bank, they have to go like take this service down, which might be a large website, you
yeah,
know, and then having to pull that trigger. But then as a leader, telling them, yes, you have okay, because if it goes south and this doesn't work out the way we planned it, that's got to fall on the leader, not them. And
that's right.
working in
That's right.
IT and cyber in any environment, a lot of
Yep,
people they're always worried about getting stabbed in the back and who's going to have their back if they make the wrong decision.
right.
So in this kind of case, not only and even I've had situations where wrong decisions were made, but those are learning opportunities to go to the that person or whatever and say, hey, what can we learn about this? So because one thing I've noticed either came out of those poor decisions came out of complacency or out of fear,
Yep,
and rarely incompetence. It was always complacency or fear.
yep,
So you have to address those two things. That hey,
yep.
don't be afraid. I've got your back, even if you do the wrong thing. I've got you on this one. Complacency, that's a personal behavioral issue that you
Yeah.
have to address yourself.
But see, what I'm seeing is the journey is becoming so clear, right? Because God, you feel God moving you to
Yep.
into risk, to
Yes.
abandon, right? Like the hero's journey, right? The first step of one of the first steps of the hero's journey is the crossing of the threshold, right? It's where you go somewhere to the point of no return. You can't go back home, right? Because you're on the boat. You're on the boat going nowhere. You did that, right? So you're and you intuitively know technology and leadership, right? Technology and leadership. You've got the leadership soft skills. You know you're going to use that. You've got the technology, the cyber learning. You know you're going to use that. And so that's the boat that you get on, right? And then you end up in these incredible places. Um, Now I'd like to take a little bit of a pivot here in the conversation to talk about something that, like when we talked before, this was profound. You doing this work of cybersecurity, protecting against identity theft and things like that, you've you've developed a parallel to the spiritual life, the spiritual walk. Would you be willing to flesh that out a little bit for us, like what the parallels are between cybersecurity and just the
Sure.
spiritual life?
So every attack, every breach comes down to we always say two things: either exploited vulnerabilities or stolen credentials. I boil it down to one thing, and that is unauthorized access.
Yes.
Because when you do cybersecurity or whatever you're protecting, organization, employees, think of it as a house. When you build a house really doesn't have doors, doesn't have to have doors and windows. We do it to protect from the elements. And then if you take that further, the door itself, you put a lock on it. Why? It's not to keep you in or out. It's so you can give authorization or access to people you want in the house, that kind of stuff. So oftentimes, in cybersecurity, it's the same. They call it the 3A model: access, authorization, and authentication. Are you say who you say you are? So the long gone are the days of single passwords.
Yeah.
Because if I know who you are and I know something, like the password, so that's why we moved to what's called least privilege and multi-factor. So you get authenticators and biometrics and passkeys and all that kind of stuff to get to a point that it's something something you have, and something you are. So like biometrics, that kind of stuff. Why do we do that? To prove that it's you, Johnny, that it's your identity, that you're the only one that can go into this bank account. You're the only one that can get in this social media account and do these posts. You're the only one that can get access to that particular mobile app that you like to use. So the stolen credential side
Yeah.
is the way the criminal actually says, well, if I can pretend to be Johnny and then do what Johnny does. So we spend a lot of money, millions, billions of dollars on identity access management. That's one whole
Yeah.
facet. The other side is software that has vulnerabilities. Vulnerability that, software is written to do a thing, but then a vulnerability comes in that an attacker can exploit. So if you don't patch the software, if you don't keep it up to date, therefore it gets exploited, and then you can make the software do something it wasn't supposed to do. Like this
Yeah.
attacker, they got in a vulnerability, they actually got in and was trying to get to a bunch of loan information,
Yeah.
which they wouldn't have access to, but because you've exploited the vulnerability, you run as the same identity as that piece of software, which often
Yeah.
is called system or root, or admin. You're running at the level that piece of software. You take that back to Genesis 1 and how we were created, to
Yeah.
be a child of God. God pursued us and set us in there. He gives us an identity. And then what does
Yes.
the accuser do? The Satan, the accuser comes in and tells you that, you know what? You don't have to play by his rules. This
Yeah.
knowledge of good and evil is something that you want to know yourself, and you have the ability to decide what is right and what is wrong.
Yeah.
So he immediately starts attacking your identity, not as a
Yes.
child of God, but as a God itself. You can
Yes.
become God. So doing that. So all through history, there's this been attack on identity, on who you are, and then what happens is as we grow up and we learn who we are as identity, we think we're a child of God, but we also learn that, okay, I'm a spouse, I'm, a student, I'm, a friend, or all these kind of stuff. And then we get these little bents and mental because our brain is just, it's not even the operating system. Our brain just controls things. Our mind, what God gave us, it actually controls the brain. We're just not brains walking around on a stick. So
Right.
our mind. So what happens is the accuser starts to exploit that and starts to saying, you know what? You're a loser. You couldn't
Yep.
do this the last time. So they try to exploit that. Or, you know what? This besetting sin that you have, whatever it is, if it's this addiction or whatever, I know that is a way, it's not the way you are wired this way. So it's a bug in your software. So therefore, I'm going to attack that. I'm going to exploit that.
Yeah.
And so Satan shows up as who? At the flip side of your strength of that coin is your curse, you know. So so Satan is very good, and Paul, writes this, in Romans 7 so
Yep.
elaborately, that pivot in that book, and you're like, whoa, what just happened here? I don't do the things I want to do, and the things I want to
Yep.
do, I don't do anymore. It's an
Yep.
exploitation of our programming. It's how
Yep.
God wired us to be. And so therefore, if the accuser is not attacking your identity or trying to steal your identity and tell you who you are and who you are not, he will use your weaknesses to go to exploit what you're most vulnerable for. So,
Yes.
so that's why I see cybersecurity and your spiritual identity so close together, because all the billions of dollars we spend in cybersecurity typically fall in those two categories. We got to protect the identity access management, and we got to patch the vulnerabilities. We got to continually keep patching and figure out things the way they're supposed to be used and make sure they're used that way and not used in a different way.
That's beautiful. So then what does that look like in the spiritual walk, right? So like as far as like protecting against the vulnerability, and protecting the identity against unauthorized access. What
So
does that,
in
look like?
IT and cyber world, we call it hygiene. That it's not something you can just wake up one day, bless you, something you can just wake up one day and go do and clean up. It's something that is continual that you have to do all the time. You always have to be scanning for vulnerabilities. You always have to be
Yeah,
patching. You always have to be
yeah,
auditing the logs of the identity. Every time an identity is not needed anymore, it's got to be, removed from the system. How many times somebody gets in with a stolen credential to find out that person left the company a year ago, or they changed roles 6 months ago, and now nobody looked at that and said, hey, whatever. So in the personal life is always evaluate who you are in Christ. I mean, he knows who you are, and you get that, and you always evaluate what it is, and you feed that. And then shed off the old identities that you didn't have anymore. As Paul goes, through Romans, some of you were, in Galatians. And he gives all these things that you were, but you're not those things anymore. So you have to shed the old identities that you were without Christ and how you are now under the blood of Christ to be able to go do that. And then as far
wow,
as exploitation and vulnerabilities is like continually, in the word, reading every day to understand, to address feelings. Like when you get feelings of anxiousness or inferiority or those kind of things, check those. Take them against the word. Use your church, a support group. Understand, surround you with those things who are actually watching your hedge for you. That can kind of hold you accountable or
yep,
that kind of stuff. Because people can see when you and your programming, they know you're bent a certain way and you're
yep,
headed a certain way, whether that's through anxiety or depression or addiction or whatever, however you cope with those kind of things or dealing with those, replace those. So what I, one is reading, it's being in the Word,
yep,
it's worship music. Our mind, our brain loves routine. Our brain just loves routine. And the more you feed it the routine of, daily study in the Word, being with, the
yep,
body of Christ, with the
yep,
assembly of others, singing, all these things benefit that keep us up to date, keep us refreshed, so that
yes,
when these other things happen, we don't have to, succumb to them. Doesn't mean they will happen. I mean, I tell you, Johnny, there are millions, hundreds of millions of vulnerabilities that are patched every day. There are millions of attacks against identities every day. And
yeah,
sometimes that's just one large company. So you put it across the internet, that kind of stuff. And so the accuser just gets better at it. And we're in an age of AI now
yep,
where things just get a little faster to be able to
yep,
do that. But God gives us the strength and and the ability to do that. So like right now in this season of life, even though I'm on like the back end of it, I'm super excited about AI and what it can do because now I can actually use that to go evaluate these identities and evaluate these, vulnerabilities much faster.
yes,
Be able to set up things more automatically, so that it can reason and say, hey, this is bad, this is not the way it's supposed to. We've been doing it banking for fraud prevention for years. Now we're getting that into actual, systems management and operations. That's pretty cool. But anyway, back to, as I told you earlier, I cannot sit through communion meditation now. At our church we take communion every week, and I can't sit through one and just think about the identity we had and what Christ did and what the blood did for our new identity, and that the
yep,
shedding of that blood, obviously it doesn't mean a thing if he didn't, if he didn't rise, on the third day, and that resurrection gave us that note of him being the first fruit, you
yes,
know, of the grave. Because again, sometimes we act in fear. The only thing left for the biggest human fear is death, and when Christ defeated that,
yes,
the accuser can no longer use that. Forget the Roman army, that would say, hey, if you don't do what we say, we're going to kill you. When he went and defeated that and defeated death, it just solidified our identity on who we were in him. So
yes,
that's why I do the parallel between cybersecurity, identity, and vulnerability management, and who we are spiritually. Being a child of God and being blood bought by Jesus Christ Himself, and through that resurrection, that we are part. Now we get to. I think it's in Hebrews. We are part of the first fruit. We get to.
yep,
Um, I don't like to use the word harvest, but anyway, the harvesting of that first
yeah.
fruit of the grave that we get to do that.
Dude, praise God, man. And I love that the battleground, when it comes right down to it, the battleground is having your identity, your perception of your identity founded in your true identity, which is given to you by God.
Correct.
That is the ground where you can be strong and courageous. That is where the battle is fought. Because if the enemy can give you a false identity and get you acting in accordance with a false identity, then that's the seed of perceived separation from God. That's the seed of all that can happen in your life that's negative comes from that.
Yeah. Another mental health term they use is labeling.
Yeah.
I think it's good to label feelings, that they say name it to tame it, those kind of things. That's great, but you got to be really careful with your identity. If
Yep.
you label yourself a certain way,
Yep.
the accuser, the Satan, he will use that. He
Yep.
already knows it. You feel like he's
Yep.
inside your head because he knows
Right.
what it is. So if you know what they are, then you can take defenses. For example, when we get a vulnerability notice, we get them all the time and say, "Hey, this is a 0 day. 0 day means there's no patch for this yet. I mean, there's no fix. It's wide open." You do that. What we do is we immediately we go on a clock and say, "Okay, you got X number of hours to fix the critical vulnerabilities on the critical assets."
Yep.
So, a critical asset is something that might be internet facing. You need to take inventory of your own life. What is your critical assets? What are the critical things that are exposed that can be attacked first? Because those where you need to spend your attention first. Those
Yes.
are where you need to shore up your defenses first. So if you're if you have issues with insecurity, so you're going to listen to a lie that tells you are insignificant or whatever. No, you need to flip that and realize you're not insignificant. You need to shore that up first. Because I hear some people like, okay, maybe there's just certain sins that don't, bother some people. It's like, why would somebody do that? Because they don't have that bent, they don't have that inclination. So you're not going to spend a lot of time on an area of life which you just really, that's not a temptation for you.
Right.
The things
Right.
that are temptations for you,
Yep.
you need to spend a lot of time in patching the software, so to speak, and getting your mind right, getting your identity right in those areas so that you won't fall into those things.
Man, I love it, man. I love it. It brings you right back to Psalm 16, into Psalm 16. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Where does joy exist? In the presence of God.
Amen.
The joy of the Lord is my strength. Where do I get the joy? How do I have the most possible joy? Right? It's the most possible time in the presence, right? Like the presence of God is transformative. So man, I just, and again, that's stirring up your affections for the Lord happens differently for different people. We need the word, we need worship, we need community, we need all those different things, right? But at the end of the day, the idea that your identity is the battleground, you're fighting for your identity, I think is so important for people to hear. Now, as we start to kind of angle towards a close, there's a question I ask everybody that comes on the show. And that is, for you, right? For you, Tim, like as you're, looking to the future and looking to the impacts that you want to make in the world, which I can see that God has wired you for impact. I can see like people get to watch this and listen to this session with you. And there's seeds that are going to get planted in hearts from just what you've talked about in terms of the parallel between cybersecurity and the spiritual walk. Like you have a message, you have a calling, it's evident. So with that message and that calling, what is your big dream, or what would you like to see happen in the world? Big dream, little goal. So as big as you want to go, as small as what I want to accomplish this week. What comes to mind as I'm saying that?
Well, I first go personal. First, my family. I have 6 kids. I got just had our 5th grandbaby, a 6th one, on the way. So always coming from how I came up years ago, I already passed the point I thought I would ever get, as far as my goal, whether that be success, in a career, or financially, or whatever. So God has blessed, my family. So I want to continue that their impact is greater. As somebody misquoted this a few days ago, but I have said for decades, I would tell my kids that my floor or my ceiling is your floor, meaning you need to start from here. So the goal is that they got to start out different and better, that their impact would be, would go further, through that. So also during that whole time of in the late 90s, I had to supplement my income. So I started a side business, which actually turned into an MSP in 2006. And so that has 7 employees. I run that part time. One of my kids works for it. And so my big dream is that that become not just, it's not just a legacy for me. I actually had one of those moments in early 2000s. I actually read a personal finance book, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I was making enough money that I didn't need the side business and I was going to quit it. But then I saw that, okay, that could be used as a tool. And so I took more risk and I turned it into consulting, that turned into managed service provider. Now it has 7 employees. So now it's like I'm exploring with this. This can have a greater impact, not just with my family, but in the world. I mean, we support missions. You know, I have a sister who runs a school in Africa. I mean, there's all those kind of things. So the goal is all those things have to be financially funded, is to get to the point where, you know, maybe this is the vehicle that God can use, you know, managing, you know, IT operations, cybersecurity for small businesses, and it's grown great in the last 3 years. You know, it was just like break even, but it's you know, grown great the next 3 years. So I don't know what the next 3 years is gonna, but the last 3 years has done more than I thought it would. And so the next 3 years, it's like, so my big goal is like, I'm actually trying, Johnny, to figure out what that goal is, because whatever I set for it, I'd already passed every time. So obviously I'm not setting the goals high enough. But am I scared enough to set the goals where they need to be? So that's kind of where I'm at right now. You know, what I do with it.
I love it, man. I love it. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about that business. Not now. Maybe you could give me a blurb about the business and who your target audience is, so I can include that in the show notes.
Yeah.
So that people that are watching this, if it's a good fit, can reach out to you. So I'd like that. Secondarily, I'll say you have this calling, this desire for multi-generational success.
Yes.
Right? My ceiling is your floor. That's what you're saying about your children, grandchildren, descendants. And so if there's anybody out there who's got a special calling towards multi-generational success and stewardship, you know, maybe there's an introduction to be had with Tim on that, because Tim already has a fire for that.
That's the one thing. It's not even a regret. I love mentoring other people, love helping other people's career grow, and I was able to do that at the bank. I'm even doing it now. I'm flying to Dallas this week to go train a lot of new people, you know, and they're just out of college. You know, some of them just switching new jobs, you know, doing training. I love doing that kind of stuff. So one thing I haven't done is I've had very few mentors in my life on the other side of that, you know, and I've had some good ones and they've been great. I just wish I would have had a lot more, because maybe these gray hair would have been a little more fruitful than they have. Yeah.
Well, let me tell you, man, I just, from the heart, man, I appreciate and respect you, Tim.
Thank you.
I respect you, and, you know, just the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you prioritize, the way you love your family. You know, the gift that God's given you, which is that gift of kind of curiosity and discernment and leadership all mixed together, that it made you capable of being in, you know, basically fighting on the cybersecurity front lines at the highest level. I mean, for a major banking institution. Glory to God, man. He's made you a special instrument in his hand, and I just appreciate you being with me today.
Thank you, Johnny. I appreciate it. It's been fun.
And everybody who's been with us up to this point, you know, there's going to be a place for you to leave affirmations for Tim on the Slack channel. So that's one thing. If you watch this and you were blessed, call out the good in Tim on the Slack channel, and there's going to be a button and a link for that to do that. But anyway, everybody, appreciate you staying with us up to this point. Another great show, and we'll see you next time. Take it easy.
Thank you.